I'm really appreciative and thankful that you have all taken time out of your busy schedules to be here today. We have about 150 folks, I think, that are here, so thank you. Yesterday we had a workshop for our leaders, coordinators, key volunteers. 50 folks were there yesterday with a lot of really spirited conversation, a lot of great discussion about what we can do, and we're just expecting that to explode and expand today. So thank you for being here to be part of that. It's really hard to believe, and I had to kind of stop and count again. It's been 9 years since the first conversations about starting Fair Districts PA. I was the Vice President of Government and Social Policy for the League of Women Voters of Pennsylvania at the time. And I had been invited to a meeting with the League President at the time, Susan Carty. We had been invited that summer to a meeting in Senator Lisa Boscola's office in the Capitol building in Harrisburg. I had never been there. I did not own a suit. I bought this suit for the occasion. And I had never heard of gerrymandering, and the meeting was to talk about gerrymandering and an independent redistricting commission. I had never heard those words before. So I was invited, I said sure. I did a lot of research beforehand. I showed up, I was terrified, I was very nervous. I got in a room full of senators, representatives, and their policy staff. And I was just kind of floored. And at a certain point in that conversation, Senator Boscola looked at Susan Carty and me and said, "And unless the advocates make a lot of noise, this will never happen." And I sat there thinking, this is a room full of state senators and legislators, and they're looking at me, who just bought my first suit ever, and saying, unless you, advocates, make a lot of noise, this will never happen. So I've been on a crash course ever since, trying to understand what does that mean. At the time, Barry Kaufman had been executive director of Common Cause PA for 30 years. Some of you knew Barry. He was a fixture in our state capitol for 30 years. And he had been working on redistricting reform issues for that entire time, 3 decades of work on that. He had a group of folks who would meet every other Saturday morning, and a few of you might have been part of that group, to talk about solutions to extreme partisan gerrymandering, which was destroying our state. He and I had some conversations after that meeting with Senator Boscola, and we convened a meeting in early January of 2016 with leaders and board members of the League of Women Voters, Common Cause Pennsylvania, Committee of 70, the Pennsylvania Council of Churches Advocacy, and some smaller organizations that have since vanished. We talked about the need to start a kind of a flagship project to address redistricting, because as just a piece of different organizations' agenda, nothing had happened, nothing had changed, and organizations were realizing, unless we fix this, we can't fix those other things. So those who were in the room on that day agreed we would start a project called Fair Districts PA, and Barry Kaufman and I would co-chair it. And the League agreed to be the fiscal sponsor. Within months of that time, Barry Kaufman had retired. Some of you had volunteered, and we have been learning ever since. How do we do this? What is it like to try to make noise in our state capitol? Many of you were there in 2018 when over 800 Fair Districts PA supporters gathered in the Capitol Rotunda in an attempt to exercise our right to alter and reform our state government. We spoke in support of bills to create an independent redistricting commission. One of those bills, House Bill 722, introduced by Representatives Eric Rowe and Steve Samuelson, had 110 co-sponsors, a healthy majority of Pennsylvania's 203 representatives. The other bill, Senate Bill 22, introduced by Senators Lisa Boscola, a Democrat, Mario Scavello, a Republican, had 21 co-sponsors out of 50 state senators. Neither of those bills had been given a vote at that point, late in the session, just months before those bills would be dead. We sang, we chanted, we made a lot of noise. We were part of some rule changes since, limiting the size and use of the rallies in the rotunda. Some of you were there not long after that, when House Bill 722 was gutted in a committee meeting called with less than 24 hours notice, no agenda, and no time for committee members to read the amendment to the bill we supported. The bill was changed to allow 6 legislative leaders to draw new districts, 4 from the majority party, 2 from the minority party. And then it was never voted out of committee. Some of you may remember also Senate Bill 22, which was then amended in committee, amended further on the Senate floor, then saddled with an amendment to create judicial districts, allowing legislators to gerrymander our judiciary as well as our legislature. And then it was passed out of the Senate with that amendment and buried under over 600 amendments in the House and never given a final vote there. So we saw many ways to disrupt the interests of the citizens to alter and reform their government. And we saw that some forms of making noise don't accomplish our purposes, although we will continue to try those, but we will be looking for other ways to make noise. Much has happened since then. We have seen divisions in our state and our country deepen. We have seen distrust in government continue to grow. We have seen voters respond with frustration when they see how little their voices are heard. And we have lived through a census process delayed by health concerns, and we have experienced the most transparent redistricting process in Pennsylvania's history. To quote some observers, it's not hard to raise the bar when the previous bar was on the ground. So please don't think that our work had no impact. The Legislative Reapportionment Commission, responsible for drawing the Pennsylvania House and Senate districts, held a total of 23 meetings and hearings, some before preliminary maps were released, others after release of proposed maps. Hundreds of citizens, including many of you, gave testimony, including national experts who were invited to offer analysis. The Commission's public website received more than 6,000 comments and file submissions, including more than 100 statewide maps. That was the result of public attention and the result of public advocacy to have a more transparent process and to have a more fair and impartial commissioner, the 5th commissioner, the chair. The resultant maps are the most responsive legislative maps Pennsylvania has seen since the 1980s. We moved from being among the most gerrymandered states in the nation to having a House map with almost no partisan skew. In a hypothetical 50-50 election, we will end up with 102 and 101 House districts, which is what we have right now. Our Senate map, not quite so good, still provides a small partisan advantage, was clearly drawn to give safe seats to senators on both sides of the aisle, the proverbial buddy-mander. But even so, it is less skewed than maps for the previous 3 decades. Our Pennsylvania congressional maps are normally enacted as bills, and if you remember in 2021, that didn't happen. The House State Government Committee, thanks to public pressure to do better, held 8 public hearings and offered a public portal to receive map submissions and public comment. They chose a final map from among those without explaining why, made changes behind closed doors without explaining those changes, and then passed that out of the House and Senate. Governor Wolf, to his credit, also held public meetings and vetoed that map, which then resulted in litigation, which brought the case to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court did a novel thing I don't know that it's been done anywhere else. They invited further submissions. I was part of a group with the League of Women Voters and Common Cause and ACLU that submitted a map. Committee of 70s Draw the Lines Project submitted a map. There were other maps submitted. And the court received public testimony from experts around the country on the submitted maps and then chose one of the most fair and the one that had least change from the map that had been drawn by a special master during the League lawsuit of 2018. So by objective analysis of traditional mapping criteria, that map, our new congressional map, and our current House and Senate maps are far better than maps produced in the previous decades. So thank you. Thank you all. Just take a moment. And those maps mean that your votes do have more impact do mean that those chambers can move, and we've seen that in this most recent election. And they do mean that we are being heard a little bit better, not a lot better, but a little bit better in our state legislature. We still have a lot of work to do. And we have many questions. How much public input was actually put to use? We have no way of knowing. Who made the final decisions about where the lines were drawn on any of those maps? We have no way of knowing. What criteria governed selection of final maps? We don't know. Whose voices were heard and whose voices were ignored? We really don't know. And we likely will never know. What we do know is there's a growing body of evidence showing that maps drawn by independent redistricting commissions can minimize partisan advantage, increase trust in the mapping process and in the outcome of elections, and also prevent endless litigation. And you'll hear more about that today. After the House bill with 110 co-sponsors was gutted back in 2018, 2 legislators stopped me in the hall outside the Capitol Rotunda. They actually ran over and grabbed me, one on each side, grabbed my arms, and said, these were women that I had known for a while. Let me just clarify. There were people that I knew, that I had talked with, that we had interacted. They were supporters. They came over and stood on both sides of me and said, we have been talking about you and Fair Districts PA, and we want to know, are you going to quit? One said, I think you are. There are so many groups that have tried to do things like you're trying to do, and they run into roadblocks, and they just give up. And the other said, and I told her she's wrong. You're not going to quit. They stared at me and said, so what are you going to do? And I said, no, we are not going to quit. We're going to continue because we are not going to quit because the stakes are too high. This is not just about lines on a map. This is about representation. This is about democracy. This is about trust in democracy. This is about communities being heard and voters feeling like their voices make a difference, and problems, deep-seated, long-standing problems in Pennsylvania actually sometime, someday, soon getting solved. That's what this is about. That's why we are not going to quit. Many of us started this work naively hoping that legislative leaders would listen, do the right thing, and we would cheerfully go back to our lives, gardening, bird watching, those other things that we love to do, sleeping in the hammock in our backyard or reading a long novel. I haven't done that in a long time, I'll be honest. The more we learn, the more clear it becomes that gerrymandering is a foundational part of a dysfunctional, unaccountable legislature, and the impact ripples across our state in more ways than we can understand. As a former legislator told me, sadly, a former legislator from my area who invited me for lunch. I've been invited for lunch by a number of different people who want to give me messages, and this one was interesting. We talked a bit about how important this was, and she said, do you know what a keystone is? I said, this is a keystone state. I do know what a keystone is. She did this. She said, gerrymandering is the keystone of Pennsylvania corruption and control. And we have seen that. We have seen how that plays out in legislative dysfunction and cavalier disregard for the needs of every part of Pennsylvania. Our engagement, advocacy, and public outreach, along with similar work from some of our partner organizations, yielded better maps for this decade and hints that we may yet see better representation. Some legislators and supporters think we should be satisfied with that and leave things as they are. No, we will not. We have no guarantee in law for better maps in the future. We have no promises that voters' voices will be heard in future elections. And we have no promises that the long unaddressed needs of the people of Pennsylvania will be remedied by policies and budgets that serve us all well. Voters in all parts of Pennsylvania know they are still not being heard. They may not understand why. Many of them do not understand why, and they vote in ways that, to us who do understand, might make no sense. And that's in part because they just say nobody's listening. And somebody says, I'll listen. They just say, good, I'm going to vote for you, even if that's not going to solve the problem. We may not understand how things work. Voters may not understand who stands in the way of reasonable solutions. But we all know we deserve better. I've been encouraged recently by calls and emails from past volunteers who had stepped out for other reasons and know they need to re-engage. And some of you are among those. I've been even more encouraged by contacts who have never been active in politics, who want to know, what can we do? How can we make sure that we're being heard? We are here today to think about effective strategies for public outreach and education and for building broader, stronger advocacy networks. We have a tight timeline, far more challenging than for most states that struggle with partisan gerrymandering. Pennsylvania is one of 24 states that do not allow citizen initiative and referendum. We are one of just 10 of those states that require bills to be passed through 2 consecutive legislative sessions before going on the ballot for a public vote. And of those, we're among just 4 that have 2-year legislative sessions. So the work has to start now to get a constitutional amendment passed in time for the 2031 redistricting. Now, I've met many legislators since we began who would like nothing better than to represent us well. They are there. They do exist. They are trying. And I've met many who know that gerrymandered districts have enabled a legislative process that gives leaders who draw the maps too much control over their colleagues and over the legislative agenda. There are legislators in both chambers and in both parties who believe, for sure, without question, that we need an independent redistricting commission with clear rules for transparency and public input and strong prioritized criteria. And they are joined by many Pennsylvanians who, when polled, say they want maps drawn by independent citizens, not politicians elected from those same maps. But we know from sad experience that there are legislators and leaders in both chambers and in both parties who would like to leave the process as it is in the hopes of locking in unaccountable majorities for their own parties for decades in the future. I have no way of knowing the future. Surprise. But I do know this. There are too many of us well-informed voters for the gerrymandering of the past to continue. We now have access to free mapping tools. We have access to excellent nonpartisan platforms that allow us to analyze and compare maps quickly. We have far more ways to share information and work together remotely than at any time in the past. And our work continues to grow in every corner of the Commonwealth and will continue to grow, thanks to you who are here helping us do that. It is definitely time for change in Pennsylvania. We know leaders don't like to give up power, but we also know voters are tired of the status quo and eager to reclaim the right promised in our state constitution to alter and reform our government. An independent redistricting commission is an essential step toward a stronger government of, by, and for the people of Pennsylvania. So today, we want to give you information to help you be effective in outreach and advocacy. We want to share some tools and practices that can help you in that work. We want to provide opportunities to network with others from your region or areas of interest. Our goal is to find new ways to make noise about the need for redistricting reform. And every single one of you is a part of making that happen. So thank you. So before introducing our next speaker, I want to say thank you to all the volunteers who helped make today possible. Many of you are not aware of what an incredible, incredible team Fair Districts PA is. We have people doing all kinds of behind-the-scenes work. And for this, Jean Handley, the Fair Districts PA Dauphin County Coordinator, has done an incredible job finding this location, organizing everything, pulling the Dauphin County team together to do an outside share of the work to make this happen. So thank you to Jean and the whole Dauphin County team. I also want to thank Ruth Yeiser, our outreach director. I don't know if Ruth is here, but she is she keeps a lot of things. Hello, Ruth. There she is, back in the back. Yes, Ruth Yeiser. She organizes our polling place outreach. She keeps our tabling activities on target. If you get an email from Outreach, that's Ruth. And she has done a great job overseeing registration and keeping us organized for all of this. So thank you, Ruth. It would take too long to thank everybody who has been involved in this and all the little jobs behind the scenes that get done. But thank you to all of you. You know who you are. We would not survive without the work that you do. We've had consultants look at our work and say, if you paid people to do that, it would be astronomically expensive. Just simply keeping our social media going. They're like, how do you keep 42 Facebook pages alive? Good question. Volunteers. It's all volunteers. So thank you to all of our volunteers, and thank you to our speakers and presenters who are joining us today. None of them are being paid. None of them are being funded by FDPA. They are here to support democracy and to participate in this. Thank you. I wanted you to hear this morning from some of the organizations we work with most closely, starting with our closest ally and our most important ally and our fiscal sponsor, the League of Women Voters of Pennsylvania. Our fast start in 2016 and 2017 was in large part thanks to local leagues who invited Fair Districts PA speakers to come explain why this work matters. Some of our local coordinators were and still are also league leaders. In some places, the local leagues and local Fair Districts PA groups work so closely, they're almost synonymous. In other places, FDPA coordinators serve as liaisons between the local league and FDPA. And in some places, local Fair Districts work has helped reboot and reinvigorate local leagues. So I'm very pleased to introduce the current league president, Susan Gobreski. Susan has a wealth of experience with Pennsylvania politics and policy. She started as an organizer, then regional coordinator for Clean Water Action, spent years leading other advocacy groups, and founded Education Voters PA in 2007 and led that for 8 years. She is now the primary consultant for the Sedgwick Group, a consulting agency for strategic issue advocacy campaigns and projects that help make communities stronger, and so works with a number of different Pennsylvania organizations. She was the director of government policy for the League from 2021 until becoming League president very recently. Her insights and creative ideas have been incredibly helpful to me, and I look forward to working together even more closely in the next few years ahead. So, Susan, while she's on her way up, I want to just show you something which I found. The League recently, a couple years ago, sold a property that they had in Harrisburg. Susan, you can join me up here, but I'm going to give this to you. On behalf of the League. I was part of the team that was cleaning out the League offices. The third floor had turned into a bit of an attic for all kinds of stuff. And I came across this, and they were like, we're going to just throw that away. I was like, no, you're not. This was made after the 1990 redistricting, when Pennsylvania had 21 districts, and that was one of the first. The League has been advocating for fairly drawn districts since the 1980s. I thought this is a great token of the League's tireless work on this issue, and so we are very thankful to have you as partners. And on behalf of Fair Districts, I present this to the League.
Hi, everyone. My name is Susan Gobreski. I have a long career in policy advocacy, and I'm really excited to be here. I want to start by thanking Carol and the entire Fair Districts team. And Carol and I actually have worked together over the years preceding some of this and some of the work that I was doing before. But when Carol and I really started working closely together, it was really about thinking about what is the work of the League as she was leaving her position as an officer of the League. And she and I ended up in a couple of conversations, and we really decided that it was just, we were going to be friends and work together really well. I have huge regard and respect. So few people in the world take a minute and say, you know what is needed? all right, I'm going to do that. So Carol, thank you to you, to looking at the resources, and we're going to come back to that in a bit. I also want to say, yeah, thanks. I am really happy to be here representing the League of Women Voters. One of the principal tenets of my personal motivation to do advocacy work is because I believe that women need more political power and that the world would be better off when we do that. And when I actually started doing some of the work, I actually looked around, and as many of you know, the League of Women Voters has been a continuously operating organization, has done incredibly powerful work over the decades, has missed some things along the way, and is working to build up and improve on the policies that we have that left us sitting on the sidelines as full voter enfranchisement for all people, including people of color, was tackled. So there is work to be done for all of us. Some of it has to be broad, some of it has to be focused. So I always look forward to opportunities to work with people. I am joined today by, and you'll get a chance to hear from her later, but our incredible newish, we get to say that for a little while longer, a few more days maybe. Amy Weidstrom, our executive director, is an incredible advocate and is taking charge of doing the work that we need to do to rebuild, to sustain, to grow the footprint of the League, and the collaboration with fair districts is incredibly important. Stephanie Sun, the vice president of the League, is also here, back over there. And then Diana Dakey, who has been a longtime committee member, like state policy committee member, and has agreed to hold down the fort on some things. So, and I would just invite you, in fact, I'll actually solicit you to make sure that you have joined the League of Women Voters, including signing up for emails for sure. That extends our reach. We went through, we sometimes litigate on some of these issues, as you all know, which I'll talk about in a sec. And we went through a recent exercise related to voting, some of the voting issues, and realized we had people in 66 of 67 counties. So we have, yeah, but we still have some work to do. So if you know anyone in Cameron County, hit them up and be like, you gotta, but we also need you to join. The membership gives us standing. It also allows us to divide when somebody needs to sue and somebody needs to be able to walk in the room. We are able to strategically deploy the resources of the broad coalition. So I'm excited to be a part of rebuilding. I'm sorry? Sure, Amy, Diana, and Stephanie, would you please stand up for a moment? Thank you. There are many other of you. So some of you who shifted energy. There's Maureen Groscheider. I can't name everybody. So, but I'm very, very happy to be here with them. But with all of you, thank you to all of you. Oh, and Brett, we've got all these people here. So what I want to do is just a quick reminder. I'm going to spend a little bit less time on the details. Carol covered most of everything important, as she does. But just as a quick reminder, every policy, whether or not it's food policy, I was listening to food policy on a podcast this morning, the roads we drive on, what happens when we flush, goes away. The policies that make work-life balance possible, that create parks and recreation spaces, natural places that provide jobs, all of these things are decided by the people that we elect. So elections matter powerfully. I talk to people who say, I don't care about politics, and I'm like, okay, well, let's sit down, and we have to talk. So who wins elections matters. And then the other thing that we know is that representation matters, right? So we need people that look like us, that have our experiences. We need people that don't look like us and don't have our experiences to be able to get into office so that we can create dialogue. And redistricting across the country is one of, or a failure to redistrict is one of the contributing factors to the toxicity that we have going on in our society. We have asked people to gather together in homogenous groups, double down on their politics, and fight. And we're not able to have dialogues. I'm not saying we have to agree with everybody all the time. I'm very, very good at disagreeing with people. But it is really incredibly important that we have the ability to have empathy, to hear from each other, to try and understand other experiences. So we must make sure that we have a legislature, that is comprised of people who actually represent the places that they come from a variety of perspectives. And without redistricting, that does not happen. So representation matters, and then the other thing that matters in this is advocacy. We all wish, as Carol said, that we could send our elected officials off to Harrisburg and be like, food policy, the Flushing thing, the schools, they got it, we sent them, we picked them, we sent them off to do their job. But what we know is that if we don't stay on it, then they will do things, they will become more and more insular as well. And including, not just on the policy issues, but actually on fixing the game so that they can stay in office. And there are a lot of good people who also, resist redistricting because they're like, I'm great, and I want to keep doing this work. So it's a very challenging situation for all kinds of good reasons and all kinds of bad reasons. But what we do know is that the most important thing, a principle of this, is that each of us, each individual, not just as voters, but each person who has the right to say something about elections has the right to do it. So voters have to pick politicians. We can't have politicians picking voters. You're going to hear about the legal principles that we're going to be following. We're going to be talking more about that. I'm actually excited to listen to that as well. But so on the redistricting issue, I'm going to just say a couple more things, and somebody wave at me when I have a minute left or something. But I wanted to say a couple. I'm just looking at some of the testimony that we provided, that Pennsylvania is one Commonwealth, not two teams, right? Somehow in society, we have become this place where it's like winning matters more than a fair game. But we work together, we play Little League, we shop, drive on roads. Every person in Pennsylvania should believe that every member of our General Assembly and Congress would be willing to fight for us, would be willing to help us see a problem in our community and help work to get that changed. And again, that doesn't happen when the focus is on trying to stay in office, trying to rig the game. So we have this obligation to stick with it. We will continue to talk about the principles, including transparency and objective principles that are put in place before a process begins, maintaining reasonable principles for districts like compactness and minimizing the division of communities. The interests of voters require ignoring incumbents, and we can't draw maps to lock in an advantage. And we are now seeing the results. Pennsylvania's legislature, amidst a whole bunch of changes in the country, actually stayed approximately the same in the House, a little bit of change. And we have a legislature that pretty closely represents Pennsylvania and the districts. And that happened because of the work of all of you. And it didn't happen in the Senate because we didn't get things over the hump there. And so there's a big focus coming. We have 6 years, basically. The other thing about redistricting is that it comes up all the time. It is a regular occurrence. And one of the things that we all need to do, and I'm so glad you're here, is we need to sustain this for the entire time. We need to keep going. And we need to do it with every resource at our disposal. So some of you may have seen this, but I'll just, my favorite thing on the internet this week is this came from, I think, Iceland, but I'm not sure. You may have seen this. So there was a cygnet, which is a little baby swan, frozen to the ice. And somebody sent out a call for help, and a naturalist sent a message that said, I am on my way with the necessary equipment. What was that necessary equipment? It was a friend, several thermoses of water, and a surfboard in case anything happened with the ice. They freed the baby swan. And the person who was writing about this said, it's great food for thought about, what do you do in times of crisis? What do you do when there is a need, when you see something that needs to be done? You may not be a naturalist, but the naturalist wasn't coming with especially special skills. She came with a friend, thermoses of warm water, and a surfboard, something to keep herself safe, right? Which I love too, in a time where we have to consider self-care. So sometimes the necessary equipment is us, or a friend that you all, each of you, so I invite you to go think of a friend that you can help bring along. But redistricting right now is the baby swan in the ice, a little bigger than that. And so that we can all continue to say to ourselves, I am on my way with the necessary equipment. This is a fight worth fighting. It is worth doing over years. We get tired. It's okay if we split up sometimes, if it's okay to take a break. It's okay to take a turn. Say, Carol, I'm really tired right now. Can you take this? And then Carol can call and say, Susan, I got to take a break for a month. I got to do something with family. Can you run this meeting? Or I show up to this thing. We show up for each other. We divide up the work and we keep going. But we have to maintain. There are so many steps that we need to take in this fight. It is daunting, but it is doable. I am very glad to be in this with all of you. Thank you for having me. Thank you, Carol, for all the work that you do. And thank you for all the work that you do. Let's get them.
We were planning to hear this morning from Andrew McGinley, who was recently appointed as Vice President of External Affairs for the Committee of 70. Committee of 70 is another of those organizations that's been a strong and faithful partner in our work. In fact, the first donation we ever got was from Committee of 70, a check for $500 very early on. You're going to need some funds. And that was our funds. Our startup funds in 2016 was $500 from Committee of 70. They regularly share our information, regularly share opportunities to engage in their weekly email. They have met and advocated with legislators with us at key moments, and their Draw the Lines program was a huge help in getting people actually looking at how do you draw a map. Andrew is new to his role. He began just recently. He's responsible for leading and coordinating 70's external engagement affairs with a focus on developing policy positions and advocacy strategies, and he's working closely with us in our redistricting table, a group of organizational leaders who meet to talk about how we can collaborate on what we're doing, and Susan, Amy Weidstrom, Andrew, there's several others here who are part of that table. He's not able to be with us. Somebody drilled a hole in his gas tank, and so he will be with us later. He is helping to lead a session this afternoon about how our state legislature works and does not work. Before taking on his role at Committee of 70, he worked in the state legislature as general counsel to the Pennsylvania House Appropriations and Government Oversight Committee, where he also served as the lead negotiator for the House Democrats during the 2021-2022 legislative redistricting process. So he has an interesting background, some interesting insights, and he will be part of a breakout session this afternoon, but he's not here with us this morning. Another member of Committee of 70 who we work with closely as well is Justin Villery. I think it's Justin Villery. He's a staff member with Committee of 70. He's the one who led the Draw the Lines program, and he will be leading a breakout session this afternoon about how to draw a map. So for some of you who say, I want to draw a map, I don't know how to do that, he will be getting you started, and he will be assisted by some of our team who won Draw the Lines competitions over the years and got interested in redistricting and then joined us to help with the work that we do. So those are two sessions you can look at this afternoon if you want to connect with some Committee of 70 folks. Another key partner in this since the beginning has been Common Cause Pennsylvania. As I mentioned earlier, Common Cause was part of the initial launch of Fair Districts PA, and some of our first informational meetings were co-hosted with Common Cause. I am really pleased to introduce Philip Hensley-Robin, the current Common Cause Pennsylvania Executive Director. He brings several years of experience leading Fair Districts New Jersey, a project of the League of Women Voters of New Jersey, and he also served as the New Jersey League's democracy policy analyst. Before that, he worked as Pennsylvania Deputy State Coordinator with the Campus Vote Project, leading nonpartisan student voting efforts in Pennsylvania during the height of the pandemic. He also won a Draw the Lines mapping contest at one point, so he's got some mapping skills. So Philip, thank you for joining us today. We look forward to hearing from you.
Thanks so much, Carol. As she mentioned, yes, having been a Draw the Lines winner the first time around, I just feel like here among my people of redistricting nerds and advocates. So it's really an honor to be part of this program today. Thank you, Carol, for the invitation. Thank you to all of you for all of the really important work that you do. This is going to be a marathon. It is, as you know, not something that we're going to solve overnight. It hasn't been, but it's really the the power of the people in this room that are going to solve gerrymandering in Pennsylvania. And it's our persistence that will ultimately prevail, I do believe. A little bit about Common Cause for those who might not know. Like Carol mentioned, my predecessor, Barry Kaufman, and Common Cause Pennsylvania have been very actively involved in redistricting reform efforts going back many years, being an active presence in the legislature. Common Cause, like fair districts, like the League, is a nonpartisan nonprofit. Common Cause has been around for over 50 years now. Was founded in the 1970s by a Republican, John Gardner. And Common Cause's mission has always been to hold power accountable, to fight for reforms that will level the playing field. In the 1970s, their assessment was that, at the height of the post-Watergate moment, it seemed like pretty much every powerful special interest had a lobby group in Washington and in the states. The people didn't have a lobby group, and that's what Common Cause was founded to be, the people's lobby. And in many ways, I think that work has been carried on, both by Common Cause in the states and by many other organizations that have taken up the mantle of being those advocates for the public. Common Cause has been deeply involved in redistricting reform, not just in Pennsylvania, but nationally as well. Common Cause chapters in Michigan, California, Colorado, New Mexico, Minnesota, they've been actively lobbying and advocating and have helped pass some of the foundational reforms that are now the gold standard for redistricting reform, an independent redistricting commission. Just this year, a lot of folks were following top-level election results, having their own opinions about that. What got lost is some real reforms that were passed locally. For example, municipal level redistricting commission, independent citizens redistricting commission for the city of Los Angeles passed substantially because of a campaign led by Common Cause California. So independent redistricting commissions are proven, they work, they're being adopted in states and in municipalities all around this country. I think people are coming to understand that this is how we guarantee fair districts, and it's time that Pennsylvania got on board. Pennsylvania has had an experience of litigation, of advocacy that has, succeeded in pushing forward the reforms that we've seen so far, a more open process, for example, with the LRC this most recent cycle. But ultimately, we're not going to solve this issue without passage of an independent redistricting commission and a reform of our state constitution. I'll talk a little bit now, moving beyond redistricting to what else does Common Cause do? What else does Common Cause Pennsylvania do? Because I think that we all know that redistricting reform is, one perhaps keystone in the structure upholding unjust results and corruption in our state. There are lots of other elements of our democracy that need root and branch reform. So Common Cause has been advocating on a number of issues, for example, voting and elections. One of our biggest campaigns has been our work on nonpartisan election protection. So during this most recent election, we worked with hundreds of volunteers, ultimately deploying over 800 nonpartisan poll monitors at polling places all across Pennsylvania. And those nonpartisan poll monitors are there to advocate for voters, to assist voters, and to report issues to our nonpartisan hotline. That effort was not only historic and tremendous assistance to voters on election day, but it helps us in the next step of our voting and elections advocacy effort, which is reform in the state legislature. Pennsylvania's mail ballot laws, Pennsylvania's election laws are out of date. They have a number of issues which result in disparate treatment from county to county. In some counties you can, for example, cure your mail ballot. In other counties, you can't. In some counties, there were satellite elections offices where you could go and request a mail ballot in person and fill it out and right there, and it worked really well. In some places, it didn't work very well, and in many places, it wasn't an option at all. So bringing uniformity and consistency to Pennsylvania's election laws is essential to have that pro-voter experience where voting rights are truly respected and institutionalized in Pennsylvania. And so we'll be advocating for strong pro-voter reforms in this next legislative session. Finally, we also have a number of other deep issues with Pennsylvania democracy that Common Cause Pennsylvania will be advocating on, including campaign finance reform. We all know that campaign finance, Pennsylvania is sort of a wild west of campaign finance with no limits whatsoever, poor disclosure requirements. We've seen the ruin that Citizens United has done to our federal elections, and Pennsylvania has always been one of those least regulated problem children. We're never going to truly have the democracy we deserve unless we reform our campaign finance system, and that's something that Common Cause has always been advocating for and will continue to advocate for. So, with that, I'm going to thank you all for the time. Thank you, Carol, and really looking forward. If you want to hear more about the work that we're doing on redistricting reform with Carol, come to our session. I believe it's at 2:30. I'll be presenting on the Independent Redistricting Commission constitutional amendment and some new changes we've made to that bill recently. Thank you.
Our final speaker is Simone Leeper from the Campaign Legal Center. She is here from Florida, so she's come the farthest of anybody who is here with us today, and I'm sure she's feeling cold because our cold is here just for her. Campaign Legal Center has been an important partner in the work for fair redistricting across the country and have offered advice to us a number of times along the way, which we are very appreciative of. Simone has represented litigants in federal and state level voting rights litigation and has led the Campaign Legal Center in a document that came out this summer, which we were waiting for someone to do. And when I saw it, I said, this is what we've been waiting for. We were thrilled to see it. She wrote and led the team that researched a report on highlighting the lessons learned from redistricting commissions in the 2021 redistricting cycle. So she's going to give us a high-level summary of some of those lessons now, and then she will lead a full breakout session after lunch where she will go into much more depth and talk about case studies and what the Campaign Legal Center team learned as they looked at commissions across the country. Really, really helpful information. I will also say, when I saw that report, I reached out to Campaign Legal Center and said, we have a bill that we've been working on, we would love feedback. And Simone led a team that did a really detailed, red line is the word I'm looking for, where they went through the bill line by line and offered suggestions, changes, pointed to this works here, this language would be better here. Hugely, hugely helpful. So we are very, very appreciative to Simone and really thrilled that she's here.
Hello to you all, and thank you so much for having me here today. As Carol said so kindly, my name is Simone Leeper, and I work with Campaign Legal Center on our redistricting team. CLC is a nonpartisan nonprofit that works to advocate democracy through law at the national, state, and local levels, using advocacy and litigation to accomplish that goal. We're fighting to ensure that every American has an equal opportunity to affect our democratic process, which I think is the fight that you guys are in too. Now, what we aren't is Pennsylvania experts. I have family in Montgomery and Bucks County, but I myself am not a Pennsylvanian. So what I'm hoping to offer today is national perspective about what has worked and what we have learned from other places where commissions have been put in place. But at the end of the day, you guys are the Pennsylvanians, and you guys know what's going to work best and how to apply those lessons learned to your communities. Now, in 2021, 22 states utilized redistricting commissions for state legislative or congressional maps. They directly impacted the political representation for over 80 million voters, nearly 50% of the country's registered American voters. But not all commissions are the same. There is a structural element to commissions, and defining the terms, I think, is really important for getting on the same page about what exactly you want to be advocating for. There are commissions that are independent, bipartisan, and political. Independent commissions put the power of redistricting into the hands of citizen commissioners representing not just the two major parties, but also independent or unaffiliated voters. Bipartisan commissions put the power of redistricting into the hands of both major political parties in equal part. And political commissions, as you all know, as your legislature attempted to make your independent bill into a political commission, puts the power of redistricting in the hands of a select group of politicians, with one party having a majority of seats on that commission. In the 2021 cycle, there was also one commission, Virginia, that's a hybrid bipartisan political commission. So we looked at these different types of commissions, and you have to actually look at the commission itself, because the title of the commission often says independent commission or citizens commission, but it doesn't mean that it's actually functioning with that structure. The other important and pivotal piece to look at is the authority of the commission. Is it a commission with the full authority of redistricting that truly holds that power? The maps they passed are either automatically adopted by that commission or adopted with minor ability of the legislature to make a small allowance of technical changes to the map. Now, advisory commissions range from commissions where they can draw plans that are almost always adopted by the legislature to offering plans that are entirely ignored. And an advisory commission doesn't have a power to hold the legislature to the maps that it passes. It's a system reliant, perhaps, on norms, which we know is fragile. Now, how these commissions worked in the 2021 cycle exemplifies our laboratory of democracy. Some of them worked better than others, and there were some attributes of commissions that we learned should or shouldn't be replicated if the goal truly is to have a commission that passes fair maps. So I'm going to go, as Carol said earlier, later I'll be going more into detail about the lessons learned in specific case studies and states, but for now I want to leave all of you with some top-line takeaways from our study. The gold standard is a true IRC vested with the full authority of redistricting. Political commissions kept the power of redistricting in the hands of legislators with the exact same incentive structure as legislative redistricting. That led to similar results. Bipartisan commissions led either to gridlock or to compromise maps, where the two major parties worked together to focus primarily on negotiating for their respective partisan gain, often without public input or to the exclusion of other important redistricting interests. Now, advisory commissions, as I said, were at times no better than no commission at all, because their maps were altogether ignored by the legislature. And it's important to note that that's even when the advisory commissions are an independent commission. All those considerations that I just listed fall into the first of three categories that we assessed when looking at commissions. Those questions go to commission design, how commissions are best structured at the outset. The second category we looked at was commission baselines, how commissioners are enabled to do their work. And the third category is commission functionality, which is how commissions can be ensured to actually function to achieve their promises of redistricting reform. I've got the time. I'm going to give you guys the top-line takeaways for each of those sections. For commission design, I've already said, an independent commission vested with full authority. It needs to be made up entirely of citizen commissioners who are broadly representative of the diversity of their state. And that diversity will not happen by chance. It needs to be intentional in the design of how commissioners are selected. To that point, when we talk about commissioner independence, the process of selection needs to be structured in such a way that there isn't legislative influence, so that there's partisan politicians choosing the commissioners. That also leads to a lack of true independence. Commissions ought to be, if possible, evenly split between the primary political party, the secondary political party, and independents or unaffiliated voters. And commissions need to be large enough to disperse responsibilities, encourage collaboration and compromise, and to prevent one or two outlier commissioners from derailing the process. That all goes to commission design. To commission baselines, commissioners, especially true citizen commissioners, who may not have a wealth of experience in redistricting need to be empowered to understand and make decisions regarding the complexities of redistricting. They need to be assisted by trustworthy and knowledgeable staff and advisors, selected, and this is important, through a process designed to give commissioners a broad base of options, a process that's just as transparent as the commission itself. And commissioners need to be guided by clearly defined and ranked criteria protective of the rights of every voter. Having clearly defined criteria helps citizen commissioners understand what they should be prioritizing. And ranking that criteria helps them understand how to balance the myriad considerations. When you're thinking about how you do rank your criteria, think about your values. There's, of course, the requirements of federal law, but minority representation is a value that I think we all share. Obviously, a lack of partisan gerrymandering is something that we all share. And it's not enough to just say you can't partisan gerrymander. You, in fact, have to ensure that a map itself is not, by chance, a partisan gerrymander when you consider how the maps will be assessed by the commission. The final section is commission functionality. You need to have a redistricting process that is participatory, inclusive, and transparent. That's important to ensure that there's buy-in in the process, trust in the process, and also if there are any issues with the maps, having a fully transparent process will make any legal challenges streamlined so that the maps aren't caught up in litigation for years and years to come. Commissions need to be required to demonstrate how the final maps incorporate public input. Carol touched on this earlier. Your maps right now, you don't understand what was or wasn't taken into account. And it should come as no surprise that when you force redistricting powers that be to show their work and show how they incorporated public input, they're a lot more likely to actually do it. The decision-making and map drawing processes need to be aimed toward building consensus as opposed to rewarding contention. And finally, there needs to be a clear, specific fallback mechanism that ensures the enactment of fair maps, even if there's a breakdown in the process among the commission itself. Now that's a lot, and there is a report you all can read in case you guys want to see more detail or a session you can attend later. But the biggest takeaway, and maybe one of the most difficult ones, is that half measures are more likely to lead to half results. It can be difficult to stick to your principles on creating a true independent commission with full authority. And it can be tempting, and it's fair, especially last cycle in the laboratory of democracy, to say, hey, maybe this is better, even though it's not everything that we want. And that might be true. There might be some things on which there need to be compromise. But what we're finding is that where half measures have been passed, it's a lot more difficult now to energize people to fix a problem that they think has already been solved. So I would encourage all of you to apply what you all know to be true and to be energized to advocate for a true independent redistricting commission so that you all can have the results that you all as Pennsylvanians truly deserve. I am buzzing, and it's 10:33, so thank you all so much. Oh, yes, yeah. I do. It should come as no surprise to you. It's the ones with true IRCs with full authority. Right now, of course, California and Michigan are sort of the gold standard. But there are elements of commissions across the country that we can learn from, not just in those states. So we'll chat more about that later if you come to our session. Thank you all.
Thank you, Simone. And as she said, she will be doing a session. We will be recording her session. Of course, it will be on our YouTube channel. And we will be sending everybody who registered for this event a follow-up email where we'll have links to a lot of things. We will have a link to the report that Simone wrote so that you can find it. I would also encourage you to think about, are there sessions that you can encourage your whole local group to watch and then talk about on at your next in-person meeting, your next Zoom meeting, to maximize the work that's being done here so that you all share the same information? Or can you have somebody come and encourage people to watch a session, have somebody selected who was here to summarize the selection, and then have a Q&A about it together so that we really maximize the information that we're hearing from the folks in our breakout sessions.